All right, so today we're gonna learn how to take an HDR image, which stands for high dynamic range. Now, normally when you take a photograph, it's an SDR image, a standard dynamic range, which means that you usually have to choose either to have something blown out, overexposed, or something that's too dark, underexposed. So you lose those detail in one of those two areas. The great thing about an HDR image is it allows you to have the best of both of those worlds. You get the blown out areas and the shadowed areas with all of that detail. And the way you do that is you take what's called a bracketed photo, which is actually 5 images at different exposures. So we are going to learn how to do that on a Nikon D300 today. Now each camera has a little bit difference in how you do that. We're shooting with a 35 to 70 millimeter lens, 2.8 throughout. And some things that you need to do this is, for this camera, we need a compact flash card, a CF card. Most cameras nowadays take either an SD card or a combination of the two. So to insert your card, so come a little closer here, you push this button, this dial right here, this little lever, and you push it this way, and it opens up on the side here where you can insert your CF card. So it goes in label out. If it doesn't go in smoothly, do not force it in there. There's actually some little pins in there, and you just push it in. The very first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna format the card. So I'm gonna have you guys come on over and I'm gonna have you do these things, okay? All right, so Jacob here is gonna demonstrate for us how to do this. So you'll notice on the camera, that it says format right here. It also says format on the top on this button. What do you think that means?
Format it.
You're gonna format it, but why do you have it in 2 different spots?
I don't know.
Okay, so the reason you have that is it wants you to push both buttons at the same time.
Oh.
Okay, so turn the camera on by turning the switch on there.
All right.
Okay, and you're going to long press both buttons.
So this one and this one?
Yep, so we'll tilt this down.
All right.
And you'll notice on the top here, when you're gonna long press them until this says FOR for format.
All right.
Okay, so let's do that. There it goes. Now press it one more time. Nope, both of them.
Oh, both of them?
Yep. And you'll now it says format. So it's deleting everything off of that card, and it's essentially making it more compatible with this device. So we're optimizing our ability to do that. Okay. So most of the time when you're shooting an HDR image, you're gonna wanna shoot generally landscape, buildings, things like that. This is generally a technique not used for people or things that have a lot of movement in them because you'll get something that's called ghosting, which we might see some examples of that in our post-production. So usually it's landscapes, buildings, things like that. Real estate is another one that this one is heavily used in. So lots of applications that you can use this for. Okay, so the very first thing we're gonna do is we need to set our settings on the camera. So if we were doing something inside here, we would do probably ISO 800 to 1600. But most of the time, like I said, this is outdoor. So in a really bright situation, what ISO setting would you use?
100 to 200.
100 to 200. So as this is a Nikon, it doesn't have an ISO setting of 100. So the lowest one it has is 200. So that's the ISO setting. So to set your ISO setting, Devontae, go ahead and push this ISO button right here. And you'll see on the top of the screen here, so hold it down, it says ISO 200. To adjust that, you just turn the dial, the back dial here, to adjust your ISO setting. But 200 is the best one that we can get with this camera. So we're good there. All right, so we're gonna be shooting this in aperture priority mode. What does that mean?
You can control the shutter.
You control the aperture and the ISO, and the camera's controlling the what?
The shutter.
The shutter, there you go. So you had the right answer, you just didn't know it. Okay, so aperture priority. So each time we're gonna take this image, our depth of field from our aperture is gonna stay the same, and it's gonna take a longer and longer shutter speed. So which aperture would give us a very deep depth of field?
22.
F22? That's a good one. So, Elliot, go ahead and step in here. All you have to do to change your aperture is move this, just turn this front dial here. Oh, you gotta push the sensor button there, and you'll see it says F16. Let's get it to F22. So now we have a very small aperture, which is gonna give us a very deep depth of field within our image, right? Okay, so the next step is to actually, so now that our settings are dialed in, you're going to then compose your shot. Now, you can do it through the viewfinder, or you can do it through the LCD screen on the back here. So to get to the live view mode, there's a little button in the front here, right there. You hold that down and it allows you to turn this dial. If you don't push that down, it won't move. And we're gonna turn it to LV, which is live view. And then when I push the shutter button, we're gonna be able to see what's on the back of the screen there. And this is how you're gonna compose your shot. So we want a wide angle shot that we can get with this lens. And then we wanna choose something kind of in our mid ground. This is gonna give us a good use of our depth of field. So let's go ahead and choose the globe we have right there. So by pushing the plus icon, we can zoom in on the globe, and then we can we're gonna manually focus it, and we want this to be tack sharp, so I wanna see that detail. So in order to manually focus it, come around the front here, you'll notice that there is a switch right here that allows you to switch into manual mode. So make sure you're in manual mode before you focus it. All right, so come back around, and we'll be able to manually focus the shot there. All right, so that gives us a nice depth of field. We can get out of that. All right, and then, so we're gonna go back to single shot. Okay, pause. Okay, so now that we've got all of our settings set up, we're composed, we're ready to take our image, we need to set a couple of things. The first thing we're gonna do is we wanna tell the camera that we wanna take a bracketed photo. So on the front of the camera is a function icon, so come around the front here. So all the way to this side, you'll see right here in this little nook, it says FN, if you see it from the side here. Okay, so you're gonna hold down this function key, function button, and on the top, so come up to the top here, you'll notice that it says 5F, which means 5 frames. And by turning my main dial here on the back, I can adjust this. So get to where you can see the top here. I can adjust this to tell the camera how many frames I want to take. So I could take 0 frames, 3 frames, 5, all the way up to 9 frames. So you could take a bracketed image that's going to take 9 different exposures. Okay. So in this case, how many did we want to take?
5.
5, right. Okay. So we're telling the camera I want to take 5 bracketed photos. So come around the back side here. So right now, a normal exposure is going to be a 3-second shutter speed. So we're gonna have some long shutter speeds, and the reason that's where the tripod really comes in handy, because you cannot hold still for 3 seconds, right? Okay, so next we're gonna go to the menu, and we need to set a couple things here. So the first thing we're gonna do is under the custom menu shooting, we wanna make sure that our camera is set to bracketing and flash, which is option E, and we click OK. And then we want to make sure that our auto bracketing is set to auto exposure. So we click OK, and we just want to confirm that. AE only, that's the key thing there. Okay, then we're going to go back to our shooting menu here, and you'll notice that the option at the very bottom of the menu here is interval timer shooting. So essentially what we can do is we can push the shutter button. It's going to wait 30 seconds, and then it's going to fire off all of our shots consecutively. And the way we do that is we want to make sure that the camera is set to continuous shooting there. All right. So now that we've composed our shot, we click OK. And then using the directional pad here, our cross keys, we push to the right. This is going to give us a countdown of approximately 30 seconds. We don't want to wait that long. Let's bump this down to 10. That'll allow us to move any shake or anything like that. Okay. And then we want to set this to, we want to take one image, 5 frames, equaling 5. Once we've done that, oop, I keep going too far. Too far, too fast. Try that again. We want to click on, and then click OK. All right, so right now we're getting a 10-second countdown. There goes our first shot. Our second shot. So it's going to automatically take all 5 bracketed shots for you. And some pretty long shutter speeds here. Okay, so if we look here at our images, you're gonna see that we have, starting from a really blown out image, and as we go down, they should get darker. Yep, darker, darker. All right, so that's our normal one. And then our different ranges from our high tones to our mid tones. All right, so let's go ahead and head downstairs, and we're gonna do this outside and choose a subject that has some shadow and some bright areas, and then we're gonna come in and we're gonna edit these. Let's go. Okay, so we've set up our shot, we've composed it, we have our bracketing set to 5 images. We just went back into our interval timer, and at this point, all you have to do is click OK. Nope, it timed out. Let's go back to it. So at this point, all I have to do is click OK, and it's going to do my 10-second countdown, and then it's going to take my images. So that's how you do it with the interval timer. So that way, if you want to go somewhere, you make sure it's perfectly stable, you can do that. But that's where a trigger also comes in handy, because at this point, all I can do is just take 5 images. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can essentially do the same effect. So either using the timer or trigger is really the best options you can use to get a nice stable shot. So what we have here in our composition is, if you see, kind of turn this way a little bit, I wanted to make sure that I got the sun, something super bright, and that's going to create a really dark spot here over where the building is, and we're going to be able to look at the difference between the two of them. All right, so let's head upstairs and let's edit these photos. Okay, so now we've just taken our images, now we're going to be editing them. The first thing we need to do is remove the card from the camera. So in order to do that, we're going to, again, push this lever, and it's going to open up our side compartment here. And pushing this gray button, it's going to release our compact flash card. Now, most computers don't have a CF card reader, so you're going to need to get one of these. This one reads all different types of cards, but specifically this CF card is what we're looking for there. All right, so let's head over to the computer. Okay, so we are now ready to edit our bracketed photos. We are in Photoshop, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our images into the HDR Pro. To do that, we go to File, and we're going to go to Automate, and then to Merge to HDR Pro. It's going to bring up our Merge to HDR Pro dialog box, and we're going to click on the Browse icon here, and we're going to select our images. So here are 5 images that I've selected that have been bracketed, and then we click on OK. It will take just a moment for this to load up. It's kind of running through its process right now. One of the key things, and we'll get to this in just a moment, is understanding that a HDR image, a high dynamic range image, allows you to see the highlights and the lowlights and the midtones. We'll come back to the histogram in just a moment here. So now that we are in the HDR Pro dialog box, we have some options. And we can see our bracketed images on the bottom here. And the first thing we can do is you can play with the presets. We have a bunch to choose from. And you can even get some more plugins from other places. These are just the base ones that come with Photoshop. And you kind of see what some of them do. So if we click on photorealistic, kind of gives that color there. Let's go to surrealistic, because we want to create something that's just a little different than some of the other stuff that we've seen. So we're going to click on the remove ghost option here, because there was that overlay you saw there before. So this was the before. It had some ripples in the water which were causing some weird effects here. So we're going to remove the ghost, and we have a totally different looking image here. From here, we get to play a little bit. We can actually go in and use these sliders to change some things. So if we move the radius slider, you'll see that this is going to kind of add some haloing effect on our horizon here. We don't want that, so I'm going to kick it back up. You can see what the different options do. Edge smoothness, that's good. We like that. Most of the time, your gamma is going to do a pretty good job, but you can see if we slide it to the left how it kind of changes the look of the image. So it gives you some control, and these sliders are just kind of fun to play with. And so let's bring the gamma down. We're going to bring the exposure up, right up just a little bit. There we go. And you play with like the highlights. You can see how it changes just the look of your image a little bit. And since this is a landscape image, I'm going to add a little more saturation to it because there are no people in it, and see if we can bring out some more colors in the skies and things like that. You can even go in and adjust your curves and see what some of the different things you do. So you want more of the tones, you can go that way. But we'll just go back to the default for now. All right, so back to where we were. Ghosting. We're going to add a little more, brighten it up a little bit, and turn on edge smoothness. Needless to say, this image looks a whole lot different than the original. Once you've played with these sliders a little bit and you kind of decided that this is how I want my base image to start with, click OK, and it's going to actually open up the image into Photoshop where we can do a little more tweaking. So I'm going to open up the original image from Lightroom so we can look at the histogram and kind of compare a little bit. So let's do that first. Go back to Lightroom. Here is our base image. The camera's attempt at a well-exposed image. So we're just going to pop that into Photoshop. Command E was the keyboard shortcut there. Okay, now that we are back in Photoshop, we have our base image here. There we go. Okay, so between the two images, in fact, we're just going to drop this one on top of this one so we can kind of compare apples to apples here. Okay, so we can see on this layer here that you'll notice that in our histogram here that we have a lot in the lighter area here. So that's mainly coming from the sky and the dock here. And these are called our highlights, our whites, and then on this end of the spectrum we have our blacks, and these areas in the middle are called your midtones. And the difference is that when we see, we're able to see all of these different areas through our eyes, and then an HDR image allows you to actually see that. So you can actually see that represented really well here. We have spikes in our dark areas, we have spikes in our, our white areas, our dark areas, and then we also have some spikes in our midtones. So we get a much better realistic view of what the image looks like and more high dynamic range. That's where that term comes from. So that's really the purpose of that. And to really kind of demonstrate this, we're going to actually cut this image in half. So we're going to grab our rectangular marquee tool there, turn this layer back on, and I'm just going to click delete and then Command D to deselect so you can really see the SDR side. SDR. Let's choose a color font that pops, so we'll just go with the default black here. And let's choose a better font to go with that. That's our SDR. I think you can go bigger than that. So by highlighting the font size there, you can get an idea of what that looks like. So there's our SDR, and then we'll grab our HDR. And there you go. So that's pretty much the difference between an HDR image and an SDR image. This is what your camera normally can do. The HDR definitely gives you a lot more control and allows you to see those different levels. All right, folks, what you're going to do from here is you're going to save your image as a JPEG. So File, Save As. You're going to be completing 10 images like this one. And we'll call this one Doc HDR. And the date, which is 04/17/2019, and your initials. And you can save this as a Photoshop document for your own records, but what you will be turning in is a JPEG. So save it as a JPEG, and then save it to a place where you can find it. I'm going to drop it back into the folder with the source file. And then when your JPEG options come up, make sure that you choose quality 12 and click OK. And there you have it, folks. That's how you do it. So let's go take a look at our final product here. If we go to our folder here, HDR2, right there. we can see our final image demonstrating standard dynamic range versus high dynamic range. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any questions, please email me or text me, and I'll be happy to take care for that. It's at jbyrne@topaml.com. Make sure to like this video and subscribe and ring that bell. Have a great day.